Seattle, a city known for its peaceful suburbs, tree-lined streets, and diverse communities, striving for harmony and growth. But even in the calmest places, injustice can lurk beneath the surface, waiting for a moment to shatter the peace and shake the very foundations of a neighborhood. On a late April afternoon, the soft sunlight filtered through tall trees, casting gentle shadows along the quiet streets of the Ravenwood neighborhood, a community of hardworking families, professionals, and local business owners. The sound of birds chirping and leaves rustling filled the air, painting a serene backdrop for what should have been an ordinary day. Parked right in front of house number 147 was a sleek black SUV blocking the driveway of a neighbor's car. The vehicle belonged to Elijah Carter, 5 years old, a man with streaks of gray in his hair, sharp eyes full of determination, and a calm presence that commanded respect. Elijah wasn't just any resident. He was the FBI's regional director for the Pacific Northwest, a man dedicated to upholding justice and equality. Elijah was a symbol of strength and integrity. Over the years, he had faced countless obstacles, but rose through the ranks by his unwavering commitment to truth and service. Despite his demanding job, he always made time for his family, the anchor that grounded him amid the chaos of his work. But Elijah had no idea that something as simple as where he parked his car would ignite a chain of events that would threaten not only his peace, but also expose a raw wound in the fabric of the community. At the other end of the street, Officer Ryan Miller, a 28-year-old police officer, patrolled in his squad car. Ryan was a product of a stressful, high-pressure environment where expectations and stereotypes shaped how he saw the world. Like many young officers, he struggled to balance duty with the biases ingrained by years of societal conditioning. When Ryan spotted Elijah's vehicle blocking the way, a flicker of irritation crossed his face. This was not just about a blocked driveway. It was the collision of unspoken prejudices and deeply held assumptions about Elijah and everything he represented. Ryan parked his car abruptly and stepped out, uniform crisp, but his demeanor tense. The peaceful street suddenly felt heavy, thick with unspoken tension. Neighbors peeked through curtains, sensing that something serious was unfolding. Elijah stepped out of his home, calm but alert, sensing the storm approaching. He knew this wasn't going to be a routine conversation. "Excuse me, could you please move your car? It's blocking my neighbor's driveway," Elijah said politely, his voice steady, practiced in diplomacy. But Ryan's response was anything but respectful. "Do you even realize where you're parked? This is public property and you need to follow the rules," he said sharply, his tone dripping with challenge and disdain. Elijah felt the weight of the double standard. He had faced suspicion and mistrust all his life, often because of the color of his skin. Yet today, he resolved to remain composed and dignified. His composure, however, was about to be tested. Suddenly, Ryan drew his baton and smashed the window of Elijah's SUV. The sound of shattering glass echoed down the street, silencing the birds and freezing the neighbors in shock. "This is how we deal with people who don't know their place," Ryan shouted, eyes blazing with anger. The crowd gasped. The quiet suburban street had become the stage for a violent display of unchecked power and prejudice. Yet Elijah remained calm. Instead of reacting in anger, he slowly retrieved his FBI badge and placed it on the shattered windshield. "Who are you?" Ryan asked, his voice faltering as he stared at the badge. "Elijah Carter, FBI Regional Director," came the steady reply. The revelation hit Ryan like a shockwave. His anger wavered, his stance faltered. In an instant, the power dynamics shifted. From the distance, the wail of sirens grew louder as Police Chief Sandra Lopez arrived on the scene, a seasoned leader, a woman of color known for her integrity and commitment to justice. Sandra's eyes locked onto Ryan with a firm, unwavering gaze. "I will not tolerate any form of violence or racial discrimination within my department," she declared with authority. Ryan was immediately suspended and a formal investigation was launched. This was not just a personal incident. It was a mirror reflecting the complex, painful, yet hopeful struggle against racial injustice in America. And the story of Elijah Carter, Ryan Miller, Sandra Lopez, and the Ravenwood community had only just begun. Before we get started with today's story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. We'd love to see how far this story has traveled and who it's touched. All right, let's jump right in. Seattle's soft morning light filtered through the towering evergreens as Elijah Carter prepared for another demanding day. At 45, Elijah was the embodiment of resilience and integrity, a man who had navigated the turbulent waters of life with unwavering determination. His role as the FBI's regional director for the Pacific Northwest was not just a title, it was the culmination of decades of dedication, sacrifice, and an unshakable commitment to justice. Born into a modest family on the city's south side, Elijah's journey was far from easy. Early on, he encountered the harsh realities of systemic racism that so often shadowed the path of young black men in America. Schools that lacked resources, communities grappling with economic hardship, and societal expectations that threatened to limit his potential. Yet Elijah refused to be confined by these barriers. Fueled by a desire to create change not just for himself, but for those who came after him, he pursued education relentlessly, earning scholarships and accolades that propelled him into the ranks of law enforcement. His entry into the FBI was marked by challenges that tested more than just his intellect. In a field where trust and camaraderie are paramount, Elijah faced skepticism, subtle exclusion, and the weight of proving his worth time and time again. But he met these challenges head-on, not with anger, but with excellence and in grace. He became known for his meticulous attention to detail, his fairness in investigations, and his ability to navigate complex social dynamics with empathy and tact. Yet despite his successes, Elijah never lost sight of the realities outside his office walls. He remained deeply connected to his community, volunteering with youth programs, advocating for criminal justice reform, and mentoring young people who saw in him a beacon of hope. For Elijah, leadership was not just about authority, it was about service. The story of Elijah is a testament to the power of perseverance in the face of discrimination. Each day he carried with him the lessons of his past, the sting of bias, the pain of exclusion, and transformed them into a driving force for change. His life reminds us that true strength lies in the ability to rise above injustice, to confront it not with violence but with steadfast resolve and compassion. As he stepped out onto the quiet street of Ravenwood that day, Elijah was not just a man parking his car. He was a symbol of progress, a challenge to the prejudices that linger beneath the surface of society. His calm demeanor in the face of confrontation was no accident. It was the product of years of inner strength forged through adversity. Through Elijah's eyes, we begin to understand the complexities of confronting systemic racism, not just as a distant concept, but as a lived experience. His story invites us to reflect on the broader social fabric and challenges us to consider our own roles in either perpetuating or dismantling these injustices. In this light, Elijah's encounter with Officer Ryan Miller takes on deeper meaning. It is not merely an incident of misconduct, but a microcosm of a larger struggle, a struggle that Elijah has dedicated his life to overcoming. His response, measured and dignified, offers a powerful lesson in resilience and leadership, demonstrating that the path to justice often requires courage, patience, and an unyielding commitment to one's principles. As the sun rose higher, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood, Elijah's presence was a quiet reminder that change is possible, that even in moments of tension and fear, there exists the potential for understanding, for growth, and for justice to prevail. This is the story of a man who refused to be defined by the limits others tried to impose on him, a story of integrity, service, and the relentless pursuit of equality. And as we continue, we will see how this very spirit shapes the events that unfold, challenging not only those directly involved, but inspiring all who hear his story to stand up against injustice. Ryan Miller was just 28 years old, a young officer with a badge too heavy for his shoulders, navigating the delicate and often dangerous line between enforcing the law and facing the invisible yet crushing weight of societal expectations. His story is not one of villainy born from malice alone, but of a man shaped and sometimes warped by the pressures and prejudices of the system he swore to uphold. Ryan grew up in a working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Seattle. His father was a factory worker, his mother a nurse, and from an early age, Ryan was taught the value of hard work and discipline. Like many young men, he dreamed of making a difference, of serving and protecting his community. Becoming a police officer seemed like the noble path forward. But beneath that dream lurked the harsh realities of the environment he entered. The police academy was a crucible of intense physical and mental training, but it was also a place where old-school mindsets lingered. Ryan absorbed lessons not only about law enforcement, but also about the stereotypes and biases that permeated the culture. "I need to be tough," Ryan would tell himself during long shifts to be respected. The fear of appearing weak, of being questioned or undermined, pressed down on him like a weight he could never shake. And in those moments, it was easier to fall back on assumptions rather than challenge them. Pressure wasn't just from within the force. The world outside was equally unforgiving. High crime rates in some neighborhoods, rising tensions between police and communities of color, and the constant media scrutiny created an atmosphere thick with anxiety and mistrust. Ryan often found himself caught between wanting to be fair and the ingrained fear of the unknown or the different. On one chilly morning, Ryan sat in his patrol car scrolling through reports of recent crimes. His radio crackled with updates, a break-in, a disturbance, call, a traffic stop. It was a never-ending cycle of urgency, each call another reminder of the stakes. At the same time, the unseen pressures crept in, supervisors reminding him to be extra cautious in certain neighborhoods, offhand comments from colleagues about types of people, to watch out for jokes that blurred the line between camaraderie and prejudice. "I've got to watch my back out there," Ryan confessed once to his partner, a seasoned officer named Mark. "You never know who might be a threat." Mark nodded. "It's the job. But remember, we're here to protect everyone, not just those we're comfortable with." Ryan knew this in his heart, but the fear was real. It crept up in split-second decisions, coloring how he saw suspects, how he interpreted situations. And without realizing it, that fear sometimes morphed into actions that crossed lines. That morning on Ravenwood Street, when he saw Elijah Carter's car blocking a driveway, his reaction wasn't just about a parking violation. It was a flash of everything he'd been taught to be wary of. A man calm and composed, but one who also carried the weight of a system that often mistrusted people like Elijah. Ryan's mind raced as he approached the vehicle. Is this a threat? Does he respect authority? Those questions, biased and unfair, influenced his every move. "Sir, please move your vehicle," Ryan said firmly, trying to maintain control. Elijah's calm response, "I'm parked legally," didn't help ease Ryan's rising tension. The situation escalated quickly. Ryan's perception of challenge turned into confrontation. In the intensity of that moment, the baton came out, a symbol of authority wielded with too much force, fueled by misplaced fear and the burden of stereotypes. Ryan's actions that day were a tragic example of how pressure, bias, and a lack of proper support can lead even good people down the wrong path. Yet within this Higaz story is a call for understanding, to recognize that Ryan was a man caught in a system that failed to equip him with the tools to overcome his fears and prejudices. To see the need for change not just in individuals, but in the culture and training of law enforcement as a whole. In the days following the incident, Ryan wrestled with the consequences, guilt, confusion, and a desperate need to reconcile his actions with the ideals that once drove him to become an officer. "I never meant to hurt anyone," he admitted in an internal review session, voice heavy with remorse. "I was scared. I made a terrible mistake." The story of Ryan Miller is a microcosm of a much larger issue, one that demands reflection, education, and reform. It reminds us that behind headlines and courtrooms are humans struggling with their own fears and flaws. As we delve deeper into this story, we will see how Ryan's journey unfolds from reckoning with his mistakes to facing justice, and how it sparks a wider conversation about the future of policing in America. It was a calm Thursday afternoon in Ravenwood, a quiet suburb on the outskirts of Seattle. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows that stretched across the streets. Most residents were settling into their routines, some tending their gardens, others preparing for dinner. But for Ryan Miller, patrolling the neighborhood in his squad car, the day was far from ordinary. As Ryan rounded the corner onto Elm Street, his eyes caught sight of a sleek black SUV parked a bit too close to the driveway of a neighboring house. The vehicle was positioned in a way that to Ryan looked like a careless block, a minor violation, yes, but one that in his mind was part of a larger pattern he had been trained to notice. "Here we go again," Ryan muttered under his breath. "Another one thinking they can just do whatever they want." There was a subtle hardening in his expression, a tightening of the jaw that came from years of pressure and accumulated frustration. To Ryan, this wasn't just about a car in the wrong place. It was an affront to order, a challenge to his authority, and in his eyes, a sign of disrespect. Ryan parked his squad car and stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel. His posture was rigid, his gaze sharp and unwavering. The neighborhood's peaceful veneer had shattered in his mind, replaced by suspicion and a simmering tension. As he approached the SUV, he noticed the driver stepping out, a middle-aged black man with a calm demeanor, standing tall and composed despite the situation. Elijah Carter. The name might have meant nothing to Ryan at that moment. All he saw was someone who had, in his mind, overstepped the bounds. "Hey, you can't park like this," Ryan said firmly, his voice carrying an edge. "You're blocking the driveway. Move your car." Elijah looked at Ryan, his voice steady but polite. "I'm parked legally, officer. I checked the signs." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "Doesn't look legal to me. You need to move it now." The exchange, though brief, was charged. Ryan's tone was sharp, laced with an unspoken accusation. Elijah's calmness was met with skepticism, as if his composure was an act masking something suspicious. "What's going on here?" a neighbor called out from their porch, watching anxiously. Ryan's focus didn't waver. "Just doing my job," he replied curtly. But beneath the surface of this seemingly mundane traffic dispute was something far more volatile, the invisible thread of racial profiling that wove through countless interactions across the country. Ryan's reaction was not unique. It echoed the countless stories of Black Americans who found themselves unfairly targeted, judged not by their actions, but by assumptions tied to their skin color. Similar incidents had made headlines nationwide. A Black man pulled over for driving suspiciously, a woman questioned more harshly at airports, a youth stopped without cause on the street. Each story different in details, yet connected by a common theme: the weight of prejudice that alters the course of everyday life. As the tension built, Ryan's mind raced with warnings and doubts fueled by years of conditioned fear and misinformation. This was not just a parking issue anymore. It was a test of control, of dominance. "Move your car," Ryan repeated louder this time, stepping closer. Elijah's eyes didn't waver. "I'm waiting for you to explain why you're harassing me." The word harassing hung heavy in the air, a stark accusation that Ryan wasn't prepared to hear. For a moment, silence fell. Neighbors held their breath. The street seemed to pause. But then in a flash, Ryan's frustration boiled over. With a swift motion, he reached for his baton. The crowd gasped as the sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet. The driver's side window of Elijah's SUV exploded into shards. "Enough," Ryan shouted, his voice cracked with anger. Elijah recoiled, shock and disbelief etched across his face. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. Ryan's eyes blazed. "This is how we handle disrespect," he spat. The scene unfolded like a nightmare. Neighbors rushed outside, some pulling out phones to record, others calling for help. The peaceful street had become the epicenter of a deeply troubling incident. This moment was more than just about a car parked too close. It was a manifestation of the dangers of unchecked bias and the tragic consequences it can unleash. Comparing this to other racial profiling cases, we see a pattern: minor incidents escalating because of fear, prejudice, and a failure to communicate. Each case chips away at the trust between communities and law enforcement, deepening divides that take years to heal. For Elijah, this was not just about property damage. It was an attack on his dignity and the principles he had dedicated his life to uphold. For Ryan, it was a breaking point, a moment where the pressures of his role collided with his fears and prejudices, resulting in a choice that would change both their lives forever. As sirens wailed in the distance, signaling the arrival of help and the beginning of accountability, the neighborhood of Ravenwood was left to grapple with the aftermath. A stark reminder that justice is a fragile thing, easily threatened by fear and misunderstanding. The shattered glass still sparkled on the pavement, but the real damage was about to be done, not by fists or weapons, but by words. Ryan Miller stood over Elijah Carter's broken SUV, chest heaving with anger and fear tangled together. The tension in the air was thick enough to suffocate. His voice, sharp and laced with bitterness, cut through the quiet street like a knife. "You think just because you have a badge from the FBI, you're above the law?" Ryan sneered, eyes narrowing. You don't belong here. You don't belong in our neighborhood. Elijah's eyes remained calm, but the pain behind them was unmistakable. He straightened his back and met Ryan's gaze steadily. I'm here because I serve this country, he replied quietly but firmly. Like you, I took an oath. But that oath means something only if it's honored with respect, respect for the law, and respect for every person. Ryan scoffed, stepping closer. Respect is earned, and you haven't earned mine. That moment, a collision of words, was more than just a heated argument. It was a raw exhibition of how language can wound deeper than any physical blow. Research shows that racial slurs, derogatory remarks, and dismissive language leave lasting scars on the psyche. For Elijah, being told he doesn't belong wasn't just offensive. It was a denial of his identity, his achievements, and his humanity. This verbal assault echoed the experiences of countless individuals who have faced microaggressions, those subtle, often unintentional acts of discrimination that chip away at a person's sense of belonging and self-worth. As Elijah listened, he felt the sting, but also the burden of representing something larger than himself, the hopes and dignity of an entire community that had been marginalized for far too long. The neighbors watching from their windows whispered among themselves. Some clutched phones ready to record the unfolding confrontation. Others exchanged anxious glances, sensing that this was no ordinary dispute. Ryan Elijah said, his voice steady yet filled with a quiet authority. Words have power. They can break down walls or build bridges. Choose yours wisely. But Ryan's face twisted in frustration. I'm just doing my job. You think I want to be here dealing with people like you? Those words, laden with bias and anger, were a stark reminder of how prejudice often masquerades as duty. Elijah's heart ached, not just for himself, but for the system that allowed such hatred to fester within its own ranks. In countless cases across the nation, verbal abuse by those in uniform has eroded trust between law enforcement and communities, igniting protests and demands for reform. Words like Ryan's don't just hurt individuals, they fracture the social contract. Yet Elijah refused to be broken. He knew that responding with anger would only escalate the situation. Instead, he focused on the truth, a truth he carried with him every day. I am here to uphold the law for all of us, Elijah said, and that means holding those who abuse their power accountable, including you. The weight of that statement hung in the air. For a moment, Ryan faltered, caught between defensiveness and a flicker of conscience. This verbal battle was not just about two men. It was a microcosm of America's ongoing struggle with race, authority, and justice. Words, when wielded recklessly, can incite violence. But when used with courage and conviction, they can inspire change. Elijah's choice to speak calmly and clearly in the face of hostility offers a powerful lesson that dignity and strength often come through dialogue, even when the other side is unwilling to listen. As the tension simmered, distant sirens heralded the arrival of Chief Sandra Lopez, whose presence promised a turning point in this dark chapter. This confrontation, raw and painful, was a reminder that the battle against racism is fought not just with laws and policies, but in everyday words and actions. Elijah's resilience in the face of verbal assault teaches us that sometimes the greatest strength lies in the power of words to challenge, to heal, and to demand justice. The air was already thick with tension, a fragile silence that held the neighborhood captive. But in an instant, the quiet shattered, replaced by the sharp crack of glass and the explosive force of uncontrolled rage. Ryan Miller's hand, trembling with a mixture of adrenaline and pent-up frustration, swung his baton toward the driver's side window of Elijah Carter's sleek black SUV. The glass exploded into thousands of jagged shards, scattering like deadly confetti across the asphalt. The sudden noise jolted everyone nearby. Neighbors rushed to their doorsteps, faces etched with shock and disbelief. Children who had been playing in the yards stopped mid-motion, eyes wide and fixed on the unfolding drama. Elijah staggered back, startled, his heart pounding not just from the physical threat, but from the raw violence of the act. His breath caught in his throat as a cold wave of disbelief washed over him. This was no longer a simple dispute. It had become a public spectacle of power abused and dignity trampled. "Stop! What are you doing?" Elijah shouted, voice breaking, yet resolute. But Ryan, caught in the maelstrom of his own anger, was deaf to reason. This is how we handle people who think they're above the law. He spat, his eyes wild and unyielding. The neighborhood was paralyzed. Some witnesses fumbled for their phones, fingers shaking as they hit the record button, capturing every second of the violent outburst. Others stood frozen, torn between fear and the urge to intervene. Samantha Johnson, a local school teacher, later described the scene. "I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like watching a nightmare unfold in front of my eyes." Elijah was calm, but you could see the pain in his eyes. And Ryan, he looked like a man losing control of himself. The sound of shattering glass wasn't just noise, it was a symbol of a deeper fracture in the community's trust. The violent escalation underscored how quickly situations fueled by fear and prejudice can spiral beyond control. Elijah, though shaken, refused to succumb to fear. With a steady hand, he reached for his phone, dialing the number of Police Chief Sandra Lopez, his voice clear despite the chaos. "This is Elijah Carter," he said firmly. "I need immediate assistance. An officer just destroyed my property and threatened me." On the other end of the line, Sandra's voice was calm but urgent. "Hold tight, Elijah. I'm on my way." As Ryan's rage continued to flare, the crowd's murmurs turned into murmurs of outrage. "This isn't right," whispered one neighbor. "He's lost it." The incident became a flashpoint, a microcosm of a nationwide crisis involving racial profiling and police misconduct. The moment captured on video would soon ignite calls for justice and accountability far beyond the streets of Ravenwood. For Elijah, the broken window was more than a material loss. It was a violation of his safety and a painful reminder of the barriers he had spent his life fighting to dismantle. For Ryan, it was the catastrophic culmination of unchecked anger and systemic failings, a tragic reminder of what happens when fear overtakes responsibility. This violent crescendo was a pivotal moment, one that exposed the urgent need for reform, empathy, and leadership in the face of systemic injustice. As sirens wailed louder, signaling the arrival of backup and the police chief herself, the neighborhood held its collective breath. The storm was far from over, but the first steps toward reckoning and healing were unfolding in real time. As the wail of sirens grew louder, drawing closer, the atmosphere on Ravenwood Street was thick with anticipation and unease. Ryan Miller stood baton still in hand, chest-heaving eyes darting between Elijah Carter and the gathering crowd. But then something shifted a moment that would change everything. Elijah reached calmly into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black badge. With steady hands, he held it up, letting the afternoon light glint off the polished metal. "FBI Regional Director Elijah Carter," he announced, voice clear but without arrogance. For a heartbeat, time seemed to pause. Ryan's expression flickered from defiance to shock. The man he had just threatened and attacked was no ordinary citizen. He was the highest-ranking FBI official in the region, a man whose authority and integrity were recognized far beyond this quiet street. Neighbors who had been watching with a mix of fear and curiosity now gasped in disbelief. Phones lowered, conversations hushed. Elijah's badge wasn't just a symbol. It was a powerful reminder of the weight that true authority carries, not through intimidation, but through respect and responsibility. "You should have asked before you acted." Elijah said, his tone calm yet resolute. "This isn't just about a parking dispute or a moment of frustration. It's about respect. Respect for the law, for the people we serve, and for each other." Ryan swallowed hard, the realization sinking in. His impulsive actions now stood exposed against the undeniable truth of Elijah's position and dedication. The scene was a striking example of how official authority, when wielded with integrity, can challenge prejudice and bring clarity to chaotic situations. It was a moment that underscored the importance of accountability and the need for humility among those who hold power. This revelation sent ripples far beyond the immediate incident. It became a stark lesson that behind every badge, every uniform, and every encounter, there is a human story, one that deserves to be met with fairness, understanding, and dignity. In the days that followed, Elijah's identity and calm leadership became central to the narrative. He used his platform to advocate for reform, emphasizing that true power lies in upholding justice for all, not in exerting dominance through fear. This moment also highlighted a painful irony that even those at the highest levels of law enforcement are not immune to the damaging effects of bias and misunderstanding. But Elijah's response, measured, principled, and unwavering, offered a blueprint for change. It reminded us that confronting injustice requires not only courage, but also the strength to reveal truth with grace. As the police chief arrived, her presence brought a sense of order and hope. Together, they began the process of addressing the incident with the seriousness it demanded. This turning point was more than just about one man's badge. It was about reclaiming the values that law enforcement should embody: respect, fairness, and above all, justice. The story of Elijah Carter revealed in this critical moment is a testament to the transformative power of leadership rooted in integrity. It challenges us all to rethink our assumptions and strive for a system where dignity is never compromised. The sharp wail of the police siren grew louder, weaving through the tense silence that had settled over Ravenwood Street. The crowd's murmur was punctuated by anxious whispers. Everyone was waiting, watching, hoping for resolution. From around the corner came a sleek black SUV, flanked by two police cars, lights flashing, but no sirens blaring. Out stepped Sandra Lopez, the police chief of Seattle, a woman known for her unwavering commitment to justice, transparency, and reform. As Chief Lopez approached, her presence commanded immediate attention. Her calm demeanor cut through the chaos like a lighthouse in a storm. Clad in her official uniform with a badge gleaming under the fading sun, she radiated authority, not the kind born of intimidation, but the kind earned through respect and fairness. She surveyed the scene with sharp eyes, Ryan Miller standing defensively, baton lowered but tension still radiating from him. Elijah Carter poised yet visibly shaken, and the gathered neighbors' phones still recording faces, a mix of relief and concern. "Everyone, please step back." Chief Lopez's voice was firm but measured, carefully modulated to ease the rising anxiety. "This situation is under control." Her commanding tone immediately began to restore order. Officers nearby nodded, moving swiftly to cordon off the area and calm the crowd. It was clear that Lopez was not just a figurehead. She was a leader prepared to face difficult moments head-on. Turning to Ryan, she spoke quietly but with unmistakable authority. "Officer Miller, I need you to stand down and step aside. We will review this incident thoroughly." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he obeyed. The weight of accountability was settling upon him, reflected in the slight slump of his shoulders. Lopez then turned her attention to Elijah. "Director Carter, thank you for your patience. We will ensure your safety and address this incident with the seriousness it deserves." Her words carried genuine respect, acknowledging Elijah's position and the injustice he had endured. Chief Lopez immediately ordered the scene secured, evidence collected, witnesses identified, and all relevant footage preserved. She was keenly aware that transparency was essential in maintaining public trust. As officers began their work, Lopez addressed the gathering crowd. "This department values every member of our community," she said. "We are committed to justice, accountability, and learning from incidents like this to build a better, more equitable future." Her statement was more than mere words. It was a pledge to the community, a promise that the status quo would not be tolerated. The arrival of Sandra Lopez marked a turning point, not just in managing this crisis, but in setting the tone for how law enforcement should respond to moments of tension and potential injustice. Her leadership embodied a critical lesson: in times of conflict, integrity and transparency must lead. Without these, trust fractures further, and the cycle of fear and misunderstanding continues. Neighbors began to disperse slowly, their expressions softened by the chief's steady presence. Some spoke quietly among themselves, sharing hopes that this incident might spark meaningful change. Behind the scenes, Lopez coordinated with city officials, legal advisors, and community leaders. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but was resolute in her dedication to accountability. This moment in Ravenwood was a microcosm of a nationwide reckoning: the urgent need for leaders who prioritize justice over politics, fairness over fear. As dusk fell, the lights of police vehicles cast a blue glow over the street, a symbol not just of law enforcement, but of a commitment to uphold the values that bind a community. Chief Sandra Lopez's arrival was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, strong ethical leadership can guide us toward healing and progress. Her role in this incident would later be cited as an example of how transparency, respect, and decisive action can help rebuild trust where it has been broken. The story was far from over, but with Lopez at the helm, there was reason to believe that justice would be pursued with the vigor and fairness the situation demanded. The tense atmosphere on Ravenwood Street slowly began to shift as the initial chaos settled. But beneath the surface, the wheels of justice had already started to turn. Chief Sandra Lopez, with her unwavering resolve, knew that the events unfolding demanded swift and transparent action. Within minutes of arriving, Lopez made a decisive call. "Officer Miller," she said, her tone firm, yet professional, "you are hereby suspended from duty pending a full investigation. You are required to turn in your badge and firearm immediately." Ryan's face paled, the weight of the consequences crashing down on him like a tidal wave. For all his frustration and anger, he had never expected such immediate repercussions. The suspension was not just a punishment, it was a clear message from leadership that abuse of power would not be tolerated. Elijah watched silently, a complex mix of relief and lingering pain washing over him. The man who had threatened his safety was now being held accountable, at least officially. Yet Elijah knew this was only the beginning of a long and challenging road to justice. The process that followed was meticulous and thorough. The Internal Affairs Division of the Seattle Police Department swung into action, gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, and reviewing the extensive video footage captured by neighbors and security cameras alike. The use of technology proved invaluable. Each frame of video was scrutinized, every soundbite analyzed. The broken window, Ryan's aggressive approach, and his verbal assaults were all documented, creating an undeniable record. This transparency was essential. In a time when trust between law enforcement and communities was fragile, clear and open procedures helped bridge the gap. Elijah, too, was interviewed multiple times, his calm and detailed testimony becoming a cornerstone of the investigation. "I want the truth to come out," he said firmly during one interview. "Not just for me, but for everyone who has been treated unfairly because of who they are." Legal advisors and community representatives monitored the investigation closely, ensuring that the process was fair and thorough. Meanwhile, Ryan Miller was left to grapple with the fallout. His suspension meant not only a loss of income, but a potential end to his career. More than that, it forced him to confront the consequences of his actions born from fear, prejudice, and a failure to manage the pressures of his role. Throughout the investigation, Chief Lopez maintained regular communication with the community and the media, providing updates to keep the process transparent. "This department is committed to accountability," she declared in a press conference. "We owe it to the people we serve to address incidents like this with honesty and rigor." The public's response was mixed but largely supportive of the swift measures taken. Social media buzzed with discussions about the need for reform and the importance of holding officers accountable. The incident became a case study in law enforcement ethics, demonstrating both the dangers of unchecked bias and the necessity of oversight. For the community of Ravenwood, the suspension of Officer Miller was a small but significant step toward healing. It showed that even in moments of profound injustice, systems could respond with integrity. Yet the investigation also highlighted deeper issues within the police force, systemic problems that required more than just disciplinary action to resolve. As days turned into weeks, the investigation proceeded with care, mindful of the stakes involved. Every detail was important, every testimony weighed heavily. Elijah's courage in coming forward, the neighbors' vigilance in recording evidence, and Chief Lopez's leadership all played pivotal roles in ensuring that the truth would not be buried. The story unfolding in this quiet Seattle neighborhood was a powerful reminder. Accountability is not just about punishing wrongdoing, but about restoring faith in justice. Ryan Miller's suspension marked the beginning of a broader reckoning, one that would challenge individuals, institutions, and communities to confront the realities of racial bias and to work toward meaningful change. In the days following the violent incident on Ravenwood Street, the Seattle Police Department's Internal Affairs team launched a comprehensive investigation, one that would rely heavily on modern technology and the courageous voices of community witnesses. Chief Sandra Lopez understood that to restore trust, the department needed not only transparency, but also undeniable evidence proof that would cut through any attempts to obscure the truth. First on the list was the retrieval of video footage. Surveillance cameras installed on nearby buildings, private homes, and even businesses became crucial in piecing together the sequence of events. Detective Maria Chen, head of the Internal Affairs investigation, meticulously reviewed hours of footage. Each frame was scrutinized: the initial confrontation, Ryan Miller's aggressive stance, the sudden shattering of glass, and the escalating tension between the two men. "Look here," Maria pointed to the screen during a briefing. "See how Miller's baton swings down sharply? The video doesn't lie. It shows the exact moment the situation crossed the line." These images would become a cornerstone of the investigation, an unflinching record that told the story no words could fully capture. But technology alone was not enough. The voices of those who witnessed the event added texture and depth to the evidence. Neighbors who had initially watched in stunned silence now stepped forward, their testimonies becoming acts of bravery in the face of potential backlash. Among them was Jeremy Collins, a high school student who had recorded the incident on his phone. "I was scared, honestly," Jeremy admitted in an interview. "But I knew what was happening wasn't right. When I saw the officer smash the window, I just started filming." His footage, shared widely on social media, provided crucial context and amplified calls for justice. Another key witness was Rosa Martinez, a local shop owner who had been closing up when the confrontation erupted. "I could hear the shouting from inside my store," Rosa recalled. "I stepped outside and saw everything. That officer was angry, but Elijah stayed calm. That's what struck me, his strength." The testimonies painted a vivid picture of the day's events, adding human emotion and perspective that technology alone could not provide. Detectives also conducted thorough interviews with other community members who had been present, collecting detailed accounts of the incident and its aftermath. The combination of video evidence and firsthand narratives created an overwhelming case, one that left little room for doubt. But this process also underscored a larger truth: the importance of community vigilance and the role of everyday citizens in holding power to account. In an era where smartphones and surveillance cameras are nearly ubiquitous, technology has become an indispensable tool in uncovering injustices and promoting transparency. Yet it is the willingness of individuals to step forward, to share their truth, despite fear, that truly propels justice forward. Chief Lopez emphasized this point in a public statement: "We encourage all citizens to participate in maintaining transparency." The partnership between law enforcement and community is essential. The evidence gathered not only supported Elijah Carter's claims, but also illuminated the systemic issues underlying the incident. Patterns of behavior, moments of unchecked aggression, and the influence of bias were laid bare. For Ryan Miller, this mounting evidence would challenge any narrative of innocence or misunderstanding. The truth was clear: actions had consequences, and the community demanded accountability. As the investigation moved forward, the collected evidence became the foundation for the disciplinary proceedings and potential criminal charges. But beyond the legal ramifications, it sparked conversations about the role of technology in modern policing, a double-edged sword that can both protect and expose. Elijah's experience showed how technology could empower victims and bystanders, giving them a voice when traditional systems might fail. The story of Ravenwood Street was not just about a single confrontation. It was a testament to the power of combined human courage and technological progress in pursuing justice. Through detailed analysis, interviews, and video evidence, the investigation set a precedent that no one, regardless of rank or uniform, is above accountability. As the community rallied around the call for justice, it became clear that the future of law enforcement depended not only on the bravery of individuals like Elijah, but also on the tools and transparency that technology provides. The road ahead was challenging, but with clear evidence and community support, hope for meaningful change grew stronger. Showdown. The day of the trial arrived with a gravity that weighed heavily on everyone involved. The courtroom in downtown Seattle was packed, buzzing with a tense energy that underscored the significance of the case. This was not just a legal proceeding. It was a battleground where truth, justice, and the consequences of racial bias would be fiercely contested. Elijah Carter sat poised, his calm exterior a testament to years of experience navigating high-pressure situations. Across from him, Ryan Miller appeared tense, his youthful face marked by a mixture of defiance and unease. As the judge called the court to order, a hush fell over the room. The prosecutor opened with a compelling statement outlining the events that had shattered the quiet of Ravenwood Street and the fundamental breach of trust that Ryan Miller's actions represented. This case is about more than a broken car window, the prosecutor declared. It is about respect, accountability, and the expectation that those sworn to protect will not abuse their power. The defense attorney, sharp and strategic, countered by attempting to frame Ryan's actions as a momentary lapse under intense stress. Officer Miller acted out of fear and confusion, the defense argued. He did not intend harm, and his record shows dedication to his duty. But as the trial unfolded, the strength of the evidence told a different story. Surveillance footage, witness testimonies, and Elijah's composed recounting of the incident painted a vivid picture of unchecked aggression fueled by racial prejudice. Elijah's testimony was measured yet powerful. "I was simply doing my duty," he stated firmly, "but I was met with fear and hostility because of who I am. That is not justice, that is discrimination." The courtroom was riveted, the weight of his words settling like a heavy fog. Cross-examination by the defense sought to undermine Elijah's credibility, questioning his motives and challenging his account. Yet the unshakable consistency of Elijah's testimony, supported by incontrovertible video evidence, proved a formidable defense against these tactics. The community followed the trial closely, many attending in person or watching live streams. For them, this was more than a trial. It was a reflection of systemic issues long ignored. As the prosecution presented closing arguments, the focus was clear. Justice must prevail not only for Elijah, but for every person who has faced discrimination. The truth has been laid bare, the prosecutor concluded. Now it is time for accountability. When the jury deliberated, the courtroom waited with bated breath. The verdict, when it came, was a resounding affirmation that no one is above the law. Ryan Miller was found guilty of misconduct and abuse of power. The sentence was severe but necessary suspension from the police force, mandatory retraining, and community service. For Elijah, the verdict was bittersweet. Justice had been served, but the deeper wounds of racial bias and mistrust remained. Outside the courthouse, supporters celebrated quietly, knowing that while this battle was won, the war for equality and respect in law enforcement was ongoing. This trial underscored the power of truth in the courtroom, how evidence, courage, and unwavering integrity can challenge prejudice and bring about change. It was a testament to the strength of those who stand against injustice and a reminder that the path to justice often requires confronting uncomfortable truths with resilience and grace. The courtroom was thick with anticipation as Ryan Miller and his defense team prepared to mount their case. The atmosphere, once charged with the weight of evidence and truth, shifted subtly as the defense sought to change the narrative, a common but critical phase in cases involving allegations of misconduct and racial bias. Ryan's defense attorney, a seasoned litigator known for her sharp courtroom presence, took the floor with a confident tone. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "what we are seeing here is a misunderstanding blown out of proportion." Officer Miller did not act out of malice or prejudice. He acted in fear for his safety under extreme stress. The lawyer painted a picture of a young officer overwhelmed by the pressures of a demanding job. She emphasized Ryan's clean record and dedication, suggesting that the incident was an isolated lapse, not a reflection of character or systemic bias. Ryan himself took the stand, visibly nervous but determined. "I never intended to harm anyone," he stated, voice wavering. "It was a mistake, a moment of poor judgment. I was scared and I reacted." But as the defense unfolded, the tactics became clear: a denial of intent, deflection of responsibility, and attempts to sow doubt about Elijah Carter's credibility. "Mr. Carter's testimony is exaggerated," the defense claimed. "He provoked the situation by parking improperly and confronting Officer Miller aggressively." Such claims sought to shift blame away from Ryan, casting the victim as partially responsible, a troubling but familiar tactic in cases involving power imbalances. The prosecution, however, was ready. They methodically dismantled these defenses by revisiting the video evidence which contradicted the defense's narrative. The surveillance footage showed Elijah calmly exiting his vehicle, attempting to de-escalate the situation, while Ryan's actions escalated rapidly, culminating in the destructive act that ignited the controversy. Witness testimonies further undermined the defense's attempts at a deflection. Multiple onlookers confirmed Elijah's composed demeanor and Ryan's disproportionate response. Experts on police conduct testified about the dangers of implicit bias and the importance of training to manage stress without resorting to aggression. These expert insights emphasize that fear cannot justify misconduct, especially when that fear is entangled with racial prejudice. Throughout the trial, the defense's reliance on denial and deflection highlighted a broader issue that challenges victims face when confronting institutional power. For the public listening, these tactics serve as a cautionary tale. Denial and blame shifting are often used to obscure truth and delay justice. It's essential to recognize these patterns to advocate effectively for transparency and accountability. Ryan's case exemplified how the legal system can become a battleground where truth and deception clash, and why persistence in uncovering facts is crucial. Ultimately, the jury was tasked with seeing beyond the smoke and mirrors to judge not just words but actions and evidence. The trial's progression reinforced a vital lesson: confronting lies requires courage, vigilance, and an unwavering commitment to justice. This chapter in the story illuminated the obstacles in achieving accountability, but also the power of collective resolve to overcome them. The courtroom drama had entered a new, more complicated phase. Beyond the evidence, the testimonies, and the legal arguments, an invisible force began to exert its influence: the powerful presence of the police union. Ryan Miller, though suspended and under intense scrutiny, was not alone. Behind him stood the Seattle Police Officers Association, a robust and influential union with deep roots in the city's law enforcement culture. Their role was clear: to defend their members, often fiercely and without hesitation. This wasn't just about one officer. It was about protecting a collective identity, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of law enforcement challenges. In private meetings and public statements, union representatives rallied support for Ryan, framing the incident as a tragic misunderstanding and calling for leniency. Ryan is a dedicated officer who made a single mistake under stress. One union spokesperson said in an interview, "We stand behind him and demand a fair hearing." The union's intervention brought significant pressure on the legal system. Prosecutors felt the weight of potential backlash, city officials faced political implications, and the community watched with a mixture of hope and frustration. For many, the union's defense of Ryan was a familiar and painful reminder of systemic issues within policing, how accountability can be diluted by solidarity and institutional loyalty. Comparisons to high-profile cases, such as those involving Derek Chauvin or the officers in the Breonna Taylor case, became common. In each, police unions played pivotal roles in shaping narratives, influencing disciplinary outcomes, and sometimes shielding officers from the full force of justice. Experts on police reform often point to union contracts and protections as major obstacles to meaningful change. These agreements can complicate investigations, delay disciplinary actions, and foster a culture of impunity. Yet amidst this entrenched power, there are glimmers of resistance and reform. Chief Sandra Lopez herself was vocal about the need to balance union support with unwavering commitment to justice. "We respect the rights of officers," Lopez stated firmly, "but those rights must never come at the expense of accountability and the public's trust." Community leaders and activists also stepped forward, organizing forums and campaigns to raise awareness about the influence of police unions and the need for transparency. "The union's role shouldn't be to protect wrongdoing," said Jasmine Lee, a local activist. "It should be to promote integrity and reform." The battle over Ryan Miller's fate became symbolic of a larger struggle: the tension between institutional protection and public demand for justice. For Ryan, this union backing was both a shield and a double-edged sword. While it provided legal resources and morale support, it also placed him at the center of a fierce public debate about police conduct and reform. As the trial progressed, it became clear that overcoming union pressure would require more than just legal arguments. It demanded societal will and political courage. This chapter of the story revealed the complexity of policing in America, where loyalty, law, and justice often collide. For the audience, it was a moment to reflect on the systems that shape law enforcement and the challenges faced in holding officers accountable. But it also highlighted the possibility of change as voices across the spectrum called for unions to embrace transparency and support officers who embody true service and integrity. The union's involvement in Ryan Miller's case was a stark reminder the path to justice is often obstructed by powerful interests, but with vigilance and unity, those barriers can be dismantled. Amisha. The streets of Seattle, usually calm and bustling with everyday life, became a stage for something far more profound. A collective heartbeat of justice, courage, and unity began to echo through neighborhoods, parks, and city squares. The community's response to the incident involving Elijah Carter and Officer Ryan Miller was immediate and powerful, a spontaneous awakening fueled by outrage, empathy, and a shared desire for change. Word spread quickly, not just through traditional media, but with the unstoppable force of social media. Videos of the confrontation, eyewitness accounts, and passionate discussions flooded platforms, sparking nationwide attention. Local leaders, activists, and everyday citizens organized peaceful demonstrations, knowing that their voices mattered, that their presence could influence the tide of justice. The morning sun cast long shadows as groups gathered at the iconic Westlake Park. Signs waved with messages of solidarity, justice for Elijah, end police violence, equality for all. Among the crowd stood Marissa Jones, a community organizer who had been instrumental in mobilizing support. "We've seen too many stories like Elijah's," Marissa said, her voice strong yet filled with emotion. "But this time we're not just watching, we're acting. Together we can demand accountability and reform." The demonstrations remained peaceful but resolute, a testament to the power of organized grassroots movements. Chants echoed through the air, voices united in a call for change that transcended race, age, and background. Social media amplified these efforts, connecting people across the country. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Elijah and hashtag Seattle Speaks out trended, turning local outrage into a national conversation. Journalists and influencers covered the story extensively, shining a light on the systemic issues highlighted by the case. Community forums and town hall meetings sprang up where citizens engaged in dialogue with officials demanding transparency and meaningful policy changes. The power of this social mobilization was clear. It shifted the narrative from isolated incident to a symbol of the broader fight against racial injustice in policing. It demonstrated that public pressure could no longer be ignored. Yet this movement was more than protests and posts. It was a profound expression of collective healing and hope. In the face of injustice, the community chose solidarity over silence, action over apathy. Their mobilization reminded all that democracy thrives when citizens actively participate, holding institutions accountable. For Elijah Carter, seeing his community rise gave strength beyond the courtroom battles. It was a reminder that his struggle was not solitary, but part of a larger wave for justice sweeping the nation. This chapter in the story captured the essence of social power, how unified voices can disrupt the status quo and pave the way for lasting change. As Seattle's streets pulsed with hope and determination, the world watched, reminded once again that justice is not just a legal concept, but a communal responsibility. The message was loud and clear. Change is possible when communities come together, when voices rise as one. In the heart of Seattle's police department, a storm was brewing. The city's collective attention wasn't just on the courtroom or the protests, it was also on one person whose leadership would come to define the path forward: Police Chief Sandra Lopez. Sandra Lopez was no stranger to challenges. At 48 years old, she had risen through the ranks, earning respect for her unwavering integrity, fierce dedication to justice, and commitment to transparency. As one of the few women of color leading a major police force, her presence alone was a beacon of hope in a system often criticized for its resistance to change. When the incident involving Officer Ryan Miller exploded into public consciousness, Sandra knew this was a pivotal moment not just for the city, but for policing in America. It was a chance to prove that leadership grounded in accountability could break cycles of mistrust and transform culture. Early in the crisis, Sandra addressed her officers with a blend of stern resolve and heartfelt sincerity. In a department-wide meeting, she said, "We have a duty first and foremost to serve and protect every member of our community with fairness and respect. When one of our own falls short, we must hold ourselves accountable. There is no room for excuses, no tolerance for injustice. Her words resonated deeply, setting a tone that this incident would be met with transparency, not cover-up. But words alone weren't enough. Sandra's leadership was defined by action. She launched a comprehensive internal review and demanded full cooperation from every officer and staff member. She welcomed independent oversight, inviting civil rights advocates and community leaders to participate. One afternoon in a closed-door meeting with city officials and activists, Sandra's commitment shone through. "We must change from within," she said. "This isn't just about discipline. It's about changing the culture from recruitment and training to daily conduct." Her plans included enhanced bias training, mental health resources for officers, and new community policing initiatives designed to rebuild trust. The challenges were enormous. Police unions voiced resistance, some officers grumbled about increased scrutiny, and political pressures mounted. But Sandra remained steadfast. In interviews with the local press, she articulated her vision clearly. Leadership isn't about being popular. It's about doing what's right even when it's difficult. We owe our community transparency and reform. Examples from other cities that had undergone successful reform served as inspiration. She studied the efforts in Camden, New Jersey, where a rebuilt police force prioritized community engagement and accountability, leading to reduced crime and improved public trust. Sandra's approach wasn't perfect. She faced setbacks, protests from within, and criticism from skeptics. But her transparent communication and willingness to admit mistakes earned her growing respect. Behind closed doors, she met regularly with Maya, Carter Elijah's sister, and community advocate. Their conversations, though sometimes tense, were productive. Sandra once said, "I know trust is broken, but I promise you this department is ready to change. We want to build a future where stories like Elijah's are relics of the past." Maya, while cautious, appreciated the sincerity. "This is the leadership we need," she replied. "But actions must follow words." Sandra's leadership during this crisis became a case study in responsible command, balancing discipline with empathy, authority with accountability. For the city of Seattle, she embodied the hope that policing could evolve not by ignoring its flaws, but by confronting them head-on. This chapter teaches us a powerful lesson. Effective leadership in times of crisis requires courage, transparency, and a willingness to listen and change. Sandra Lopez showed that true leaders don't just manage crises, they transform them into opportunities for growth and justice. Her story inspires all who seek to hold systems accountable while building bridges of understanding and respect. After the storm of conflict and chaos had passed, Elijah Carter found himself facing a new challenge: the long, often difficult road of healing. The events that had unfolded, the confrontation, the destruction of his car, the public outcry left scars that went beyond the physical. They reached deep into his soul. Elijah was a man who had built his life around integrity, service, and justice. Yet in that moment of violence and injustice, he was reminded of the fragility of even the strongest spirit. The weeks following the incident were a mixture of reflection, pain, and ultimately transformation. He often sat quietly in his study at home, gazing at the framed photograph of his family, grounding himself in their love and support. But the weight of what happened lingered not as a burden, but as a fuel for change. "I won't let this break me," Elijah told his wife Sarah during a quiet evening. "If anything, it has to make me stronger." For me, for us, for everyone who feels powerless against injustice, Sarah held his hand firmly. "And you're not alone. We're all behind you." Elijah's journey was not without setbacks. Nightmares of the confrontation, moments of doubt, and the constant media attention were challenging. But he channeled his pain into purpose. One of the first steps he took was to connect deeply with the community. He began attending meetings, speaking at local events, and lending his voice to organizations fighting racial injustice and police reform. During a community forum, Elijah stood before a crowd, his voice steady but filled with passion. "We cannot allow fear and hatred to define our future. This experience showed me the worst in some, but it also revealed the best in many. Together we can demand change, but we must also heal individually and as a society." His words resonated with many, especially young people who saw in him a role model of resilience and courage. Elijah's advocacy went beyond speeches. He worked with nonprofit organizations to develop programs that provided education support for victims of police misconduct and training for law enforcement on cultural sensitivity and bias. His personal story became a powerful tool, a bridge between communities and the police. He believed that change was possible, but it required dialogue, understanding, and commitment. "I'm not just fighting for myself," Elijah said in an interview. "I'm fighting so no one else has to go through what I did." Elijah also made time for self-care and personal growth. He sought counseling to process trauma, practiced mindfulness, and nurtured his relationships. Through therapy, he learned to confront his pain, transform anger into empathy, and find peace amidst turmoil. His journey exemplified the strength of the human spirit, how adversity can be transformed into advocacy and hope. Elijah's story reminds us that healing is a process sometimes slow and painful, but always possible. It teaches us that true strength lies in vulnerability, in sharing our struggles, and in using our experiences to inspire change. For listeners, Elijah's journey is a call to action, to stand firm in the face of injustice, to support those who suffer, and to believe in the power of resilience. As Elijah Carter continues his path, he embodies the hope that even in the darkest times, light can emerge, guiding us toward a more just and compassionate future. Also, the ripples from the incident involving Elijah Carter and Officer Ryan Miller extended far beyond the city limits of Seattle. What had begun as a local confrontation quickly morphed into a national conversation, a catalyst sparking renewed calls for comprehensive police reform across the United States. Across cities from coast to coast, community leaders, activists, and policymakers seized on the story as emblematic of a broader crisis: systemic racial bias, excessive use of force, and a lack of accountability within law enforcement agencies. In Washington, D.C., lawmakers held emergency hearings. Senator Monica Ramirez, a fierce advocate for justice reform, addressed the crowd at a packed congressional hearing. This is not just another isolated incident. It's a symptom of a deep-rooted problem that demands urgent and sustained action. We owe it to our communities to ensure policing is just equitable and respectful of every citizen's rights. Her words captured the sentiment felt by millions. In response, several states accelerated legislative efforts to overhaul police training and oversight. One major focus was the implementation of mandatory cultural competency and anti-bias training for all law enforcement personnel programs designed to dismantle implicit prejudices that often influence split-second decisions. In New York City, Chief of Police David Reynolds introduced a new training curriculum emphasizing empathy, communication, and community engagement. "We must train officers not just in tactics, but in humanity," Reynolds said during a press conference. "Our goal is to build bridges, not barriers." Similar initiatives gained traction in cities like Chicago, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. Some departments began to adopt body-worn cameras more broadly, while others established independent review boards to oversee complaints and misconduct investigations, increasing transparency. Community organizations played a vital role in these reforms. Grassroots groups inspired by the courage of people like Elijah worked tirelessly to hold police departments accountable and to educate the public about their rights. One powerful example came from a coalition in Minneapolis, which launched workshops teaching residents how to engage safely and effectively with police officers. Their motto: empowerment through knowledge. National campaigns, amplified through social media, urged citizens to demand change. Hashtags like #PoliceReform, now and #Justice for All trended worldwide, creating a sense of solidarity and shared purpose. Yet reform was not without challenges. Police unions often resisted changes, fearing that increased oversight might undermine officers' authority or job security. Political debates grew heated, with some arguing for law enforcement funding cuts, while others called for more nuanced solutions. Despite these tensions, the momentum was undeniable. Experts pointed to studies showing that proper training and community policing could reduce violence and rebuild trust, critical for effective law enforcement in diverse societies. Legal scholar Dr. Allison Bennett remarked in an interview, "Reform is not a simple fix. It requires structural changes, an investment in officer wellness, and most importantly, a cultural shift within departments. The impact of Elijah's story thus became a symbol of this cultural shift. His experience illuminated the human cost of systemic failures and the urgent need for change. For many Americans, the event served as a wake-up call, an opportunity to envision policing not as a force of fear, but as a protector of rights and dignity. This national reckoning inspired new collaborations between police community leaders and policymakers, fostering dialogues that were long overdue. It also reminded the nation that progress requires vigilance, courage, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. As cities worked toward reform, Elijah continued to advocate tirelessly, reminding the public that every policy change had real human lives behind it. His voice became a beacon of hope, urging unity in the pursuit of justice. In this way, Elijah Carter's story transcended its origin, becoming a chapter in the ongoing fight for equality and fairness in America's policing. In the ongoing journey toward justice and equality, one of the most critical battlegrounds has become education. Not just for the public, but for those who wear the badge and swear to protect and serve. The story of Elijah Carter and the fallout from his encounter with Officer Ryan Miller didn't just expose a moment of failure, it exposed a systemic gap that demanded urgent attention, the need to break down bias through education and communication. Across the country, police departments began to rethink how they train their officers. Gone were the days when basic physical tactics and procedural knowledge were enough. Now, the emphasis shifted toward emotional intelligence, cultural sensitivity, and above all, communication skills. Take the example of the Empathy in Policing program launched in several cities, including Seattle, Boston, and Philadelphia. These programs brought in experts from diverse backgrounds, psychologists, civil rights activists, community leaders, to train officers not only to recognize their implicit biases, but to actively dismantle them. Captain Lisa Moreno, a veteran officer and instructor in one of these programs, often said during training sessions, "You cannot police effectively without understanding the people you serve. It's not just about law enforcement, it's about human connection." Her words resonated deeply with many officers who admitted that before the training, they hadn't realized the extent to which unconscious biases influenced their decisions. In one session, a young recruit shared, "I always thought I was fair, but this training opened my eyes. I see now how fear and stereotypes could have clouded my judgment." This revelation was exactly the goal, to encourage self-reflection and honest dialogue. Officers were taught to pause, listen actively, and communicate with respect, even in tense situations. Parallel to training officers, communities were also engaged through forums, workshops, and open dialogues with law enforcement. These sessions allowed citizens to express their fears, frustrations, and hopes directly to those in uniform, fostering mutual understanding. One memorable community meeting in Detroit saw Elijah Carter himself speaking to a diverse crowd. "Trust isn't given, it's earned through action and conversation. When we talk, really talk, we start to break down walls built on fear and misunderstanding." These words sparked renewed enthusiasm for local initiatives that emphasized police community partnerships. Moreover, technology began to play a crucial role. Departments integrated virtual reality (VR) simulations that placed officers in scenarios requiring calm, empathetic communication, simulations designed to challenge biases and improve decision-making under pressure. Officer Miller, after his suspension and during retraining, participated in such VR sessions. Reflecting later, he admitted, "I learned to see situations through different lenses. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. It made me question how I reacted and how I should react in the future." Success stories soon followed, cities reporting a decrease in use of force incidents and complaints, credited education and improved communication as major factors. But this process wasn't without challenges. Some officers resisted, skeptical of what they saw as soft skills training. Others feared that admitting bias could lead to punishment rather than growth. Leaders like Police Chief Sandra Lopez tackled these concerns head-on, emphasizing that education was not about blame, but about empowerment. We want officers who are aware, accountable, and courageous enough to change. That's how we build a department worthy of our community's trust, she often said. In schools and public institutions, too, conversations about racial justice and cultural understanding gain momentum, feeding into the broader societal shift necessary for true reform. Experts pointed out that breaking down bias starts early with education that celebrates diversity and promotes empathy from childhood onward. Dr. Maya Jefferson, a sociologist specializing in race relations, noted in an interview, "The future of policing depends on society's commitment to educate not just officers but all citizens about the dangers of stereotyping and the power of connection." Elijah's advocacy extended here as well. He championed programs that brought youth and police together, sports leagues, mentorships, and cultural exchanges designed to humanize both sides and build lasting bridges. In these initiatives, the narrative shifted from confrontation to collaboration. Communities and police learned to speak each other's languages, sometimes literally, and found common ground and shared values and goals. For listeners, this part of the story is a powerful reminder. Real change begins with education and honest communication. It teaches us that dismantling bias isn't a one-time event, but a continuous journey requiring openness, humility, and persistence. It also challenges us all to listen more deeply, speak more kindly, and act more justly. In the end, education and communication are not just tools for reform, they are the foundation for a society where every individual is seen, heard, and respected. The echo of Elijah Carter's confrontation with Officer Ryan Miller reverberated far beyond a single incident. It ignited a fire within communities, police departments, and lawmakers alike, a call for concrete change, accountability, and transparency in law enforcement policies. In the weeks following the incident, city councils and police oversight committees gathered in urgent sessions grappling with one question: how do we prevent this from ever happening again? Elijah, now a prominent advocate for police reform, was invited to speak at a pivotal hearing. His presence was powerful not just as a victim, but as a leader determined to push for systemic change. He opened with a calm, steady voice that belied the intensity of the issue at hand. This isn't just about one officer or one day. It's about a system that needs to be held accountable. A system that too often operates in the shadows. Transparency is the light that will guide us toward justice. This statement set the tone for the policy discussions that followed. Across several cities, new measures were introduced, each aiming to enhance accountability and bring law enforcement under closer community scrutiny. One of the most groundbreaking reforms was the mandatory use of body-worn cameras on every officer with strict regulations, ensuring footage was securely stored and accessible for independent review. Chief Sandra Lopez, who had already earned respect for her decisive leadership, became a vocal champion for this change. In a public address, she explained, "Body cameras don't just protect the public, they protect our officers too. They create an unbiased record of interactions, reducing misunderstandings and encouraging professionalism." But technology alone wasn't the solution. To truly hold police accountable, data transparency became a critical focus. Police departments began publishing regular reports detailing use of force incidents, complaints filed, and disciplinary actions taken. This data was made publicly accessible online, fostering a level of openness that was previously unimaginable. Community groups, journalists, and activists could now track patterns and demand answers, ensuring that no incident slipped through the cracks unnoticed. Elijah reflected on these developments during an interview. Knowing that the public has access to this information changes the dynamic. It creates pressure for continuous improvement and sends a clear message: the community is watching and we demand accountability. In parallel, citizen review boards were empowered, staffed by diverse members of the community with real authority to investigate complaints and recommend disciplinary actions. These boards acted as a bridge between the police and the public, ensuring that grievances were addressed transparently and fairly. At a community meeting, one board member, Maria Hernandez, shared, "Our job is to make sure every voice is heard, especially those who feel marginalized. Trust is rebuilt not just through words, but through action and oversight." However, implementing these reforms came with challenges. Some officers expressed concerns about privacy and the potential misuse of body camera footage. Others worried that increased oversight might erode their authority or hinder effective policing. Addressing these concerns, Chief Lopez emphasized training and dialogue within the force. Reform is not about punishment, but progress. We must engage our officers in these changes so they understand the benefits for their safety and for the community. Lawmakers also played a crucial role passing legislation that mandated independent investigations for officer-involved shootings and excessive force claims. This move sought to remove conflicts of interest that had plagued internal investigations, increasing public confidence in the process. Elijah, speaking at a legislative hearing, underscored the importance of these measures. Justice must be blind, but it also must be seen to be blind. Independent oversight ensures fairness and protects the integrity of the system. The ripple effects of these policy changes began to show. Communities reported improved interactions with police, a decline in complaints, and a gradual rebuilding of trust. But perhaps the most significant impact was cultural. Within police departments, conversations about accountability and transparency became part of everyday training and practice. Officers learned that their actions were not just legal matters, but moral responsibilities visible to the community they served. This shift was reflected in a story told by Officer Miller during a public forum months after his suspension and retraining. I realized that accountability isn't a threat, it's a promise to do better. Transparency holds us to that promise, and it has changed how I approach every call, every citizen. For the community, these reforms signaled hope. They knew the path to justice was long and fraught, but with policies grounded in accountability and transparency, they could envision a future where incidents like Elijah's were no longer the norm. These policy changes became a beacon inspiring other cities nationwide to adopt similar reforms. Elijah's story, once a painful moment, transformed into a catalyst for nationwide police reform, reminding us all that true justice requires constant vigilance, courageous leadership, and unwavering commitment to transparency. In this journey, accountability and transparency aren't just bureaucratic terms. They are the pillars of trust, the foundation of democracy, and the promise of equality under the law. As our story draws to a close, take a moment to reflect on the journey we've traveled together. The courage of Elijah Carter, the challenges faced by Officer Orion Miller, the leadership of Chief Sandra Lopez, and the voices of a community demanding justice. This is not just a story about one incident, one man, or one police department. It is a call to each of us to stand up, speak out, and be the change our society desperately needs. Justice true? Justice is more than a verdict in a courtroom or a policy written on paper. It lives in the hearts of those who refuse to accept inequality, in the actions of those who rise against discrimination, and in the relentless pursuit of fairness, no matter the cost. Elijah's story showed us the power of standing tall amid adversity. When faced with prejudice and violence, he did not falter. Instead, he became a beacon of hope, illuminating the darkness of systemic injustice with his unwavering resolve. His journey teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. It reminds us that the fight for equality demands more than passive empathy. It demands active participation. Officer Ryan Miller's story is a cautionary tale of how pressures, biases, and unchecked power can lead to catastrophic mistakes. Yet it is also a story of potential redemption, of the possibility for change when individuals confront their flaws and embrace accountability. His path urges us to support education, understanding, and reform within our institutions. Chief Sandra Lopez's leadership exemplifies the crucial role that integrity and transparency play in rebuilding trust. Her commitment to openness and reform is a blueprint for leaders everywhere that true power lies not in authority alone, but in service to justice and the people. But beyond these individuals, this story belongs to every one of us. It is a mirror reflecting the deep-rooted issues of racial discrimination and abuse of power that continue to plague law enforcement across the nation. It asks, what will you do to be part of the solution? Will you remain silent in the face of injustice? Or will you raise your voice alongside those demanding change? Will you allow fear and prejudice to dictate your perceptions? Or will you choose understanding and empathy? Each small action, each conversation, each decision to stand up matters. Change starts with awareness and grows through collective will. Today, communities are organizing, advocating, and transforming the way policing works. Technology and education and policy reforms are tools, but the real catalyst is people like you and me who refuse to accept the status quo. Imagine a future where a child's skin color never determines their fate in an encounter with law enforcement, where justice is not a privilege but a guarantee, where trust between police and the community is built on mutual respect and accountability. This vision is within reach, but only if we commit together to dismantling systems of racism and oppression. So here is my call to you. Educate yourself about racial injustice. Listen to stories like Elijah's. Support reforms that demand transparency and accountability. Engage in dialogues that bridge divides. Stand with communities that are fighting for equal rights. And when you see injustice, speak up. Your voice has power. Your actions have impact. Justice is not a distant dream. It is a shared responsibility. Before you go, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Stay informed, stay engaged, and join this growing movement for truth and equality. Because silence is complicity. And if we do not act now, history will judge us harshly. Remember, this injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Don't let this story be just another forgotten chapter. Let it be the spark that lights a fire of change. Thank you for listening.